Designing for yourself is hard, I get it. Even if you were a trained designer and are really great at coming up with ideas and designing for other people, there's just something about designing for yourself that is just so hard to overcome. You find yourself in a mess, trying out all kinds of different ideas. You feel constantly unsatisfied with it and constantly changing your mind, and you find it really hard to treat yourself like a client and get inside what the right direction is just for you. Designing for yourself can be so hard, but with the right strategy it can be done. So in today's video I'm going to talk to you about what it is that is actually causing the stumbling blocks and how you can overcome them so you can finally overcome and tackle designing for yourself. I was there for a long time. I was constantly redesigning my website, constantly changing my mind about my logo, and I was probably changing my fonts way too often. I felt never quite settled and unsure of what my real style actually was and how I could somehow represent everything I was able to do and all my talents and skills in just one thing. I felt like I was trying to communicate so much into one small thing, and it just felt so impossible to do. So over time I've come to realize what some of those stumbling blocks actually are. So first up, let's look at what some of those stumbling blocks are, because once you can identify them, it's so much easier to find ways to overcome them. First of all, you are less forgiving of your own work. Think about it. When you cook something for yourself, compared to if you go out to a restaurant or if you go to someone's house for dinner and they cook you a meal, you find yourself much more enjoying something that someone's made for you, and you're a lot more picky about what you've made for yourself, and it's just not as exciting and fun. Sure, there's the whole element of, well, you didn't have to make it and someone else has done that for you, but also the actual meal itself, the finished thing. You seem so much more impressed by what someone else has done, and yet your own, it's just, yeah, whatever, it's alright. It's because we don't see the process. We don't know all the nitty gritty. So when it comes to design, when we design for ourselves, we know all the mistakes along the way. We know exactly what it went into creating it. We know when a certain line wasn't quite straight enough, or how we made a mistake here or there. We basically know all that nitty gritty of the process and all the faults and the little things that aren't quite perfect. Yet when we see a finished design from someone else, we just see the finished perfect thing and think, wow, that looks great. But we don't realize what goes into it. And so when it comes to our own design work, we're a lot harder on ourselves. The next stumbling block is that you often want to say too much in just one thing. We feel like, but I'm a creative and I do all these things and there's so much about me that I want to share and show off, that we somehow want to show people everything that we're capable of in just one logo, or just from our basic branding. And so we're constantly in this battle of trying to say so many things with just one thing, and it's never going to work because there's going to be conflicting things and there's going to be too much going on. And when you try to simplify it, you think, but then I'm missing this thing out, and you just overcomplicate it because you're trying to say so much. The next thing a lot of creatives will do is skip steps of the design process. You think, I don't need to do that. I know what I want. I don't need a mood board. That's a waste of time. I know the kind of style I want. You'll skip parts of the process because you think, well, I know what I'm doing. This isn't for a client. It doesn't matter. I can skip things. It's no big deal. In many ways, you try to speed things up. You just think, I'll just dive straight into Illustrator and start creating a logo. Or, there's some good colors. I'll just pick them out. You just jump straight into it without really going through the process, without really spending that time deeply thinking about it and really going through the process properly, step by step. You rush ahead and you just try to whip something up because you don't put yourself up there as a priority as well. You think, well, I'm not paying myself to do this, I'm not earning money from it, so we just need to get it done. Let's not worry about all those little nitty-gritty steps, because it's not like I've got a client to share it with and get feedback, so we'll just skip some of that stuff and just get on with it. Which brings me to the next one, is that you don't have anyone to get feedback off, because when you design for someone else, you obviously are getting their feedback, what they think about it, and things that they think could be improved or tweaked, and you're getting that different perspective and fresh eyes on it. Whereas when you design for yourself, you don't have that second opinion, and so it's just all up to you. And then you feel like, well, I don't need to share all these different sketches and ideas. I'll just dive straight into what I want to do, and then you're not getting anyone else's eyes on it, and so you're just staring at it thinking, is this good enough? I don't know. And you're looking at it way too long, and it's just like when you say a certain word over and over, it starts to sound silly. Just the same with design, you're staring at it too often and it just starts to seem really silly. The next one is that you want to encapsulate everything about yourself. You somehow want your design to represent the whole you, everything about you. So as soon as someone sees it, they know exactly who you are and they get to know you. A lot of designers tend to be quite shy and reserved people. And so I think part of that introvertness is that rather than, putting ourselves out there, talking to people, letting them get to know us through, social media and video and, creating community, we think, I'll just let my design speak for itself, I'll just let my design tell everyone who I am and get to know me. So I've got to put everything about me into that design so they get to know me instantly as soon as they see my design. And then, of course, another problem we often hit is that we change our minds way too often. So maybe you've started to get a design together, you're really happy with it, really excited, and then next week you don't like it so much. Or you come across something else that's really inspiring, you think, I should have done something more like that. Or, actually, I really love that style. Why did I go this direction? I should have gone that direction. That's way more me. That's way more what I want to do. And so as creatives, we find it hard to just settle and say, no, this is the direction I'm going. This is what I'm doing, rather than constantly flitting about and changing our minds and never feeling quite certain. And another one that I know we all fall into the trap of is that we're too hard on ourselves. Constantly beat ourselves up and think, I'm just not doing a good enough job. Everyone else has great logos and they're all picking the right stuff. Mine just looks terrible. And look at my website. Oh, it's just a mess. I design websites for other people, but I can't even do it for myself. And you start looking at what everyone else is doing and pulling yourself apart, and you're just too hard on yourself. Rather than just going through the process, enjoying it and creating something beautiful, you're just spending too much time beating yourself up over it. And you're setting too high of a bar. You're thinking, well, I'm creative and I'm good at all this creative stuff, so I should be able to do something absolutely brilliant when it comes to my own design. And so you set this hugely high bar. And so you end up being really hard on yourself, thinking it's got to be brilliant, it's got to be so stellar amazing that it just impresses everybody. And so because of that, it's almost like perfectionism, where you just can't just get on with it and do it, because no matter what you do, it's just never good enough. And so you keep stalling yourself and make it too hard for yourself. Then back to missing parts of the process, another thing that a lot of designers and creators forget to do is working out the deeper meaning, what it is they want to communicate with their design and their branding. They tend to just go for what looks really cool, what's my style, what's me, rather than thinking even deeper than that and what it is that they want to communicate, what is the deeper meaning behind their brand, and actually going through a branding process rather than just trying to create something beautiful that shows off how creative and talented you are. And finally, you don't have enough constraints. Because think about it, when someone comes to you wanting you to design for them, they've got a brief, they've got all these particular constraints and things that need to happen, things that they want, things they like and don't like. There's constraints around it, there's things that have to happen. And constraints make for better design, because you work within those constraints to create something really great. When things are so open-ended, can be just anything, it just makes it too impossible, because there's just so many possibilities out there. And so without constraints, it becomes very, very hard to create a design. So that is a huge stumbling block for a lot of creatives, because they don't have any constraints when it comes to designing for themselves. And so they just don't know what to do. And that's why it's so important to not only go through the design process step by step without missing anything, but also going through it even more in depth than you would for someone else, because you've got to start pulling in and creating the constraint that you don't actually have. So you're creating for yourself some constraints. You're starting to build up what needs to be included, what can't be included, so that you've then got something to work with and a foundation with some constraints so that you can create a good design. And then it no longer is this open-ended thing where the possibilities are just completely endless. All right, so I've hinted at a few things already, but let's look at how we overcome these obstacles so you can finally design for yourself and it's not going to be an impossible task anymore. So as I mentioned before, you really need an in-depth, clear process. You can't be skipping anything, and you have to go deeper. Just like you would give a questionnaire to a client, you've got to really be questioning yourself yourself really deeply. You've got to start pulling out the nitty-gritty details of what it is you want to communicate. What is it about yourself that you want people to know about you? What is it about your style that you want people to know about? Who is your audience? You know, all the little things, and you've got to really go in deep with them so that you can start building up those constraints and building a brief for yourself, and then follow through with that with a really in-depth process without skipping any steps, but actually spending a lot of time on it. This means no skimping, not saying, well, I'm not getting paid for this job, so I'll just rush it, but actually giving yourself the time to work through it properly so that you can create something that really is perfect and then you're not going to be constantly changing your mind about, because you really went through a process properly and spent that time really thinking about it. And if you want some prompts to help you get more in depth, I do have a free email course you can find in the description below, and that will help you get started so you can start really digging deep and finding out what kind of things that you need to ask yourself so that you can create the constraints that you need for designing. Next is setting boundaries. So just like when someone gives you a brief and there's certain boundaries, you need to create boundaries yourself so that it isn't too open-ended. And these boundaries include things like, what program am I going to use to create this? You know, what color limitations do I have for creating this? How soon do I need to have it done by? What techniques am I going to use? And, you know, what skills do I already have, or do I want to learn a new particular skill to be able to achieve what I want? Giving yourself boundaries and constraints so you don't feel it's open-ended, and so you can be more productive as well. So you're saying, I'm just going to be using this program to create it, and I'm only going to be creating these particular graphics, and, you know, I'm not going to get sidetracked. Maybe even while you're going through the process, cutting yourself off from things that are going to distract you. You know, maybe if you find that things like Pinterest or Instagram just bombard you with ideas and things, that when you get to a certain stage of the process, you need to cut yourself off from that so you can just really stellar focus and really do an amazing job and not get sidetracked and think, oh, but what about this, or what about that? But just be like, okay, I've got my mood board, I've got my brief and concept. Now I'm just going to close off from everything else and just really nail this and make something brilliant. Next is being clear on the purpose. Why are you even designing this in the first place? Remember, it's not just about looking good, using the latest trends, or, you know, showing off just how talented you are. Remember what the purpose of what you're doing actually is. If you're branding for yourself, then the purpose is to communicate your brand and your purpose. It's not just about showing off your skills. You can do that through your portfolio. So it's important that you remember what the purpose behind the design actually is, and sticking to that and not getting sidetracked by, I want to show everyone how talented and clever I am, or I want to do something that's really trendy and cool right now to show everyone, you know, that I know all the latest trends and I'm up to date with what's in right now. But rather thinking, okay, the purpose of this is to create a strong brand and to communicate what my business is about and who it's for, and just focus in on that purpose and stick to that rather than worrying about all the other things. And next is getting accountability. So as I said earlier, you don't have someone to bounce feedback off when it comes to designing for yourself. So it helps to find someone in some other form. So obviously another person isn't going to be the person who the design is for, but it can be someone else that can give you that second eye, that can look at what you're creating and give you constructive feedback. So it's someone you trust, and, you know, someone that maybe has a similar kind of style to you, or is, you know, a similar level of creativity to you, that, you know, you feel will give you really helpful feedback, that, you know, when you get a bit stuck, you can trust them to help you out to make a better decision. Or maybe they'll notice things that you didn't notice. They say, or maybe you could add this, and that, you know, you're getting someone else to bounce ideas off. But you don't want too many people, because you don't want to overload yourself with ideas and, you know, too many cooks as such. If you can pick one person that's really helpful, that you can get accountability from and also feedback from. So if you've set yourself a time limit too, making sure that they keep you accountable to do that, and they don't let you procrastinate or get stuck on Pinterest and Instagram looking at what everyone else is doing, but they keep you accountable to just get on with it, do it, and do a really good job. What can also sometimes help is finding someone that is your target audience. So rather than the client that it's meant to be for, because it's for yourself, finding who it is that it's for in terms of an audience. So if it's your branding you're designing, finding somebody who is part of your audience that is really that ideal customer and getting to see what they think. Do a bit of market research. Use market research as a way of also making sure you create a really good design. So you can do this. You can design for yourself. It's not impossible. All it takes is planning, structure and systems, and you can do it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want more tips and advice like this on branding and designing for yourself, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.